Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am your host, Shannon Hicks, and our webinar is What's New in Section V830. Now, before we begin today's presentation, I would like to review a few housekeeping items. Please take a moment to observe the tools available in the WebEx event window. All participants' microphones are muted during the webinar. Please do not forget to activate your PC speakers to enable audio or connect headphones to your PC. You may have to take the step of joining the audio conference to hear sound. Please type questions you have into the WebEx Q&A dialog. You can open up the Q&A window by selecting the Q&A icon in the WebEx toolbar at the top of your screen. Today's presentation will be emailed to all attendees, and the webinar will also be posted on our website. If you have additional technical questions, feel free to contact the technical support team at support@usa.hvan.com. Now for today's presenter, Krista Tweed will be presenting our webinar. She is an application engineer. She has a PhD in physics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and 22 years experience in high-speed electrical data. I will now like to welcome Krista Tweed to begin today's presentation.
Thanks, Shannon. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about today what's new in Perception 8.30. Perception 8.30 was released last month, so the maintenance on your Perception license must be good through August 1st, 2022 in order to be able to upgrade and use the new software. It is compatible with all current frames and modules, meaning any hardware that we're currently manufacturing. And the installation file is available for download on the Perception downloads page of our website. This release is a little bit unusual in that we require an intermediate step before we go up to 8.30. There were two hardware changes that were made with this release that require that intermediate step. One is we're changing the upload process, and so we needed to do an intermediate step as kind of a way to be able to go up to 8.30 and also be able to get back down to earlier versions. And also added EtherCAT distributed clock, and that hardware change and some of the things involved with that also required that intermediate step. So you need to download both 8.28 and 8.30 from the website. Install 8.28 first, connect your mainframe, bring that firmware of the mainframe up to 8.28, and then install 8.30 and you can go on to 8.30. If you have a Perception PC that is only used for analysis purposes and is not connecting to hardware, you don't need to worry about that intermediate step. That intermediate step is really needed for hardware. As true in every major Perception release, we have a variety of new features and enhancements to the software, and we're going to look at one of these. First major new addition is harmonic analysis according to the standard IEC 16004-7. Now that's a standard that relates to harmonic analysis on 50 and 60 hertz signals, so grid type, power line application type signals. The standard has many specifics about exactly how the harmonics need to be calculated, including a sample rate of samples a second. And so it really only works for those specific 50 hertz or 60 hertz signals. It's not going to work for higher frequencies, say we see more epower type applications. There are two things that come along with this addition. One is the new real-time formula database function at Harmonics, IEC 61000, and also a new harmonics display. That's what you're seeing right here. Let me turn on my pointer. In the picture, the new harmonic analysis display that comes along with that. So that display provides both a graphical representation and a tabular representation of the results come out of that new formula. There's a quick start guide available that tells you all of the information on your different options and what comes along with that. We'll mention as far as doing harmonic analysis at higher frequencies, have been for some time 2 formulas in the real-time formula database at cycle harmonic RS and at cycle harmonics phase that do allow you at other frequencies besides 50 or 60 hertz to get that harmonic information and be able to see, form, and find out of that harmonic. CanBus remote control. So many of our GenDAC power analyzers are being integrated into larger test cells. And many in cases, users are not using at all. They run the tethered mainframe headless. Integrators were interested in really having full control over the mainframe. For Perception 8.30, basic CanBus control was available, meaning you could start and stop an acquisition, you could trigger it. There was some basic handshaking that went back and forth between power analyzation system. With this expansion of the full remote control, you can really set amplifier ranges, change sample rate, you can make hardware configuration changes via CanBus control. For those who may not be aware, our tethered mainframes offer an integrated CanBus hardware option. When you have the option on the mainframe, there are multiple things that can happen around CanBus. We can record CanBus signals, meaning signals from the CanBus, include them in the PNRF file along with the analog voltage, current, physical signals that are being measured. We can also in real time publish results to the CanBus. Those can be fed to the automation system to provide real-time information on, what is currently happening with the motor, what speed, that kind of information. Now we've just really expanded the control piece of it, which is third, so that you have control over that mainframe. When you go into production in the settings sheet and you're configuring the CanBus hardware and you enable that CAN control, there's a PDF file there that gives you a complete list of all the commands that are available. So it's right in the software and accessible. Measurement uncertainty is a topic that has come up more and more over the last couple of years, 3 to 5 say, and more discussions have been going on, especially with electric motors that operate at high efficiency. Having as low a possible measurement uncertainty becomes much more important than it was in the internal combustion world or other types of measurements. What we've added in Perception is measurement uncertainty estimation sheet. And so it's a new sheet in Perception. If you go to the Sheets menu, choose Manage Sheets, you can look at this one and turn it on. It is only available in Perception Enterprise. But when it opens, you'll see 3 columns: DC power, AC power, mechanical power. And the idea behind this sheet is that for a specific measurement point, so for specific voltage, current, and frequency, temperature, we're going to calculate for you the measurement uncertainty that's coming from the of the power analyzer. At the moment, it only supports the GN310B power card from the GenDAC family. You're just enter in the voltage point, current that's being measured, the sensor that's in use, how long it's been since that sensor was calibrated, the temperature, all that information, enter it, click calculate, and Perception is going to tell you the measurement certainty for that measurement point. There is an embedded start guide within Perception that gives you a few of the basics of what's going on and maybe what some of the terms mean. We also have a white paper that we expect to be available this month that'll be available on our website that gives a bit more background information on. The longer range plan is to move towards offering measurement uncertainty dynamically in real time as you're making measurements so that you know your measurement uncertainty is throughout your data. That will be a cost option Perception, but that's coming in the future. With 0.30, we added some XY display improvements. The maximum number of samples that can be displayed in the frame of the XY display has been increased from 1 million samples to 10 million. So you can be looking at a much wider time window in that single frame of the XY display. We've also added the capability to display a reference space. And the use case there is people trying to compare their measure maybe to a simulation model. So if you have the output of the simulation model and what you expect that XY to look like, import that as an ASCII file, and then it can be displayed and you can overlay your measured data with it and see how it compares. On the side of the status health throughput information given to the user from perception, we've really done a complete overhaul to provide much more information. We had several situations where the user might be getting an error that perception couldn't support what they were requesting, but there wasn't enough information for the user to really understand what the root cause of the problem was. So on the system health windows, we have new errors that have been added to that the user will be proactively notified. There are both errors and warning. Typically, error is something that we need to be corrected before we can go ahead and start our acquisition. The warning is really more for information. We want you to be aware. It probably doesn't affect the acquisition of data, but we want to make sure you know what's going on. So the network load, the switch throughput, missing synchronization have all been added in where a user could get a system health warning for an issue in one of those areas. And just one note, because the wording of it sometimes causes a little bit of confusion. When you see the warning, CanBus state and OK, not OK, stop, that is just a warning because it's not really an error. That terminology comes out of the CanBus standards. That's where we got those terms displaying. And it's just whenever the CanBus is stopped, then the standard says you report that as not okay. So that's just a warning to make you aware that the CanBus has been stopped. The status navigator has been expanded to navigators and perception, those tabs on the left side of the perception screen that give you information about the state of the system. So typically, if it's docked on the left-hand side of the display, it might look like this. People move it and put it at the bottom of the display in a horizontal orientation so that it's always open and displayed. And the new formulas, one is for real-time formulas. So we're going to tell you real-time formulas are either OK or the deployment failed. If the deployment failed, you can click on it, see the information of all the connected mainframes and which one is having the issue. On your network rate, there's 3 different possible messages. One is OK, everything's happy. One is 50% warning. You're operating at 50% or higher network load. And we just want to warn you about that so that you're aware you have a pretty heavy network load and you might need to keep your eye on it depending on how long your test is going to run. And if you have 100% error, meaning you exceed that network rate that's supported, you're going to see a nice red signal that says overload. You can click on that, get the information about the connected mainframes and what's going on. Similar information for the disk rates, meaning your archive location, data. How does the rate at which you're trying to write data to the disk compare to the capabilities of that disk, the speed that that disk can sustain? And the information there, okay, you can again 50% warning or an overload situation. On the 50% warning, we're only going to display that if you're saving to the disk. If you are saving data to an internal disk on a GenDAC mainframe, those are disks hard disks that we've qualified and that we know can handle and meet the specification. And so we're not going to give the 50% warning on those because we're not worried about it suddenly overloading if it's operating at 50%. We've also expanded throughput information. In the past, we looked at the amount of data based on the number of channels in the current state you're trying to currently save to disk with your continuous recording. And that's the throughput rate. Information are you trying to disk? What we didn't do was check the network load. So if you have a 1 gigabit Ethernet connection between your DAC and your perception PC, the maximum amount of data that can travel along that 1 gigabit connection is 100 megabytes a second. And we previously were not checking those throughput numbers against that 100 megabytes a second limit either. So now we're doing both. If you hold your mouse over the gas gauge for the continuous acquisition rate, you get a pop-up menu that shows you your throughput rate and also the maximum allowed for the network. So you've separate categories for the writing, how much data you're trying to push, and what the network can support. And finally, some more information has been added to the system topology dialog. So if you're ever having throughput issues or things seem to be running slow, going to the help menu and selecting system topology is a nice way to get a quick overview of all the connections in your network. So here's my perception key, and here's all the mainframes on my network, and I see the maximum throughput rate that each can handle for disks. Number of real-time formula database results that can be calculated and stored. Before perception, 8.22 and earlier, those software versions, different mainframes could calculate a different number of real-time formulas. And that number varied from 28 up to 1,000, basically depending on the mainframe size. The Gen 2 TB only supports 2 modules and thus has a limited number of channels compared to, say, the Gen 7 TA or 7 TA, which holds many more modules. And so there's different processing power in mainframes based on expected channel capability. And those varied from 128 to 1,000. But before up to perception version 8.22 and earlier, the mainframes could only store 256 data results. And if you tried to go above that, created formulas, and activated storage, the deployment of those formulas failed, but we didn't really give you information about why. So this started with version 0.24 with that feature preview. It has been around a little while, but starting with version, here's each of the mainframes we currently produce, how many cycle-based results they can support, and the storage limit for the real-time formula database. So you have much more flexibility to have many more real-time formula database formulas stored as part of your analysis. Also, we give you that information in a much more specific way. So if you go to the settings sheet in Perception and go to the real-time formula database page, there's a link there for the real-time formula database source usage. And if you click that link, this dialog is going to open. And for each mainframe that you're connected to, it's going to give you information, detailed information about how much load is on that DSP and how much you can see how many more calculations are possible. EtherCAT distributed clock. We had many of our EtherCAT users who were really interested in supporting a distributed clock feature. And the reason is that it's a really simple way to synchronize multiple systems that are using EtherCAT. So EtherCAT is an industrial bus. We don't see it very often in the North American market. It is very common in Europe. And for people that have multiple systems using EtherCAT, they can support, a system can support distributed clock. You don't need any extra hardware, no extra cables, no other synchronization. You can just use that EtherCAT as your synchronization source. So we had requests from users to add that, and we did. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is one of the reasons you need that intermediate step, there are some pretty significant changes that happen within their portion of the firmware to support the distributed clock. And so we needed 8.28 as an intermediate step to be able to transition between supporting distributed clock with 8.30 and supporting distributed clock with 8.26 and earlier. So no matter if you're going up or down with systems with EtherCAT, you're going to need to do that middle version of firmware. Within ePower Suite, we've made some changes to the efficiency mapping option. So for those who may not be aware, people that are studying electric motors often do efficiency maps. So they run their system, inverter, and motor through a wide variety of set points, torque, speed set points, interested in what the efficiency is at each of those points. So they can look over the entire operating range of that motor and understand where it operates most efficiently. And this is one of the JACK Power Analyzer. ePower offers you a very fast way to acquire this data. But we had some limitations when we first added it. So previously, the efficiency map, the 3D plot, only supported efficiency being on the z-axis. And earlier, this has been in there a little while, with the earlier feature previews of 8.24, 8.26, you could actually now decide what you want on the x-axis, y-axis, z-axis of your 3D plot. So that gives you flexibility, maybe do flux maps or look at vibration or whatever information you might be interested in seeing on the 3D map. We've also, with 8.0, I know there's going to be several people happy about this, added in the ability to not make scaling on each of those axes, X, Y, and Z, automatic, but you can fix it. And so if you're only interested in seeing a specific portion of that 3D plot, you can fix both the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis. You can decide how many height lines you want in the portion of your color map. You can turn on and off whether or not the data points are displayed. And also in the general settings of ePower, you can decide time format. The CSV or XML file has this point table that automatically generated as an efficiency map is being recorded that you can decide what the time axis is. Previously, it was always relative to the start of recording. That means when the user hits record, that's time t equals 0 and increases from there. But now you can choose to use local time or absolute time in place of that relative time. And those times are pulled from the perception PC. So whatever zone the perception PC is set to, that'll be local time. Of course, UTC is just. We've also added the ability to bring back in that set point map. Before 8.30, the efficiency table and the efficiency map were just there as helpful tools for the user while data was being acquired. Efficiency table was always automatically created as a file or an XML file where you specified so that you take that to a third-party software and do some more editing, generate that 3D plot, work with it, do future additional analysis. Now you can bring the set point mapping file back into Perception to be able to recreate 3D plot. All right, I'm going to switch over to Perception here and do a few things in the software itself. So improve sheet layout. I click on my little plus sign up here in the corner to open a new sheet. Previously, this was always literally just blank when you opened a new sheet. And you would have to click on the sheet layout and decide how you wanted it laid out. In earlier versions, it was limited to 4 different areas. Now we've expanded that to many more. You can have up to a hex entry here. But if I want to, I can also just divide this manually. So I can click the dividers and really have the flexibility to set up the display in whatever way I want. Just as we've always had the ability in perception, I want to say, okay, I'm interested in viewing I1 and E1. I click, I drag in from data sources. Perception recognizes them as a waveform and automatically creates a waveform display. Now, if I expand my real-time formulas and say I'm interested in seeing my torque and speed as meters, I'm going to select those two. Perception recognizes those are numbers, parameters, and automatically creates the meter. I can still say, okay, I want to add a user table or I want a picture here, so that can be done also. But you have a lot more flexibility for how to lay out each of your sheets. Now you could also, if I create a new display, also say, I want you to do it for me. I'm just going to pick maximum, have 6 streets. And if I wanted to click buttons and have different things added, spectrum display, time display, I can do that way as well. A new calculator. If I go and I have data on my display and I put my cursors around some data of interest, and I click on the calculator button icon in the toolbar, my calculator opens. Now previously, the calculator only showed you one group of parameters at a time. Buttons at the top of the dialog opened and you had to click between those buttons. You couldn't see everything simultaneously. Now you can. I can also hide certain of those areas of calculation aren't of interest to me. That I can get rid of them. I can also dynamically just select another signal. So as soon as I click on my U12, my face-to-face voltage measurement, the results are updated. I can click on my current, and you can see it's automatically updating. I don't have to click in here to tell it, click somewhere, click back in order for it to update. You also have some formatting options, so you can choose engineering format or scientific format. You can choose how many decimal places you want to see, and you get these results out of perception, which was never possible before. So I can put them on the clipboard, I can post them to Excel. In addition, if I go to my report and I add a table to my report, one of the options is link to calculator. If I choose the display I was using, my input signals, now I've got all of the calculator information right there available in the report, visibly really included in my information. On the ePower side, change the optional analysis setup dialog a little bit. Previously, in this dialog, for each of the optional analysis, if you click on and turned it on, it's turned on for everything that was being calculated within ePower. So in this particular example, I have both an inverter and a motor. At times we have DC power source as well. Turned it on for everything, and you didn't have the option to say, I'm only interested in for the inverter component, DC power. So now you have that flexibility. You can also see the harmonics, the IEC harmonics. This is where you activate that in ePower. You do need to be aware that as soon as you turn it on for a component, it limits the sample rate of that component to 50 kilosamples a second because that's required for the standard. And because in perception, sample rates are set on a per recorder basis, all the channels of that recorder will be set to that sample rate. Also in ePower, all of our ePower users know that we calculate torque and speed in 2 different ways. But we have to calculate torque and speed over the electrical cycle using the inverter cycle master, so that when you're doing when you're calculating calculating efficiency, both the electrical information and the torque and the speed are done over the space. Also automatically, in the past, always created what we called instant torque and speed values. Those were torque and speed done over a 1 millisecond timed cycle, so that you could see more dynamic information happening with the torque and the speed rather than just over the electrical cycle. We got a lot of feedback from users that they wanted the ability to choose times other than 1 millisecond for that instantaneous time. So there's a new entry in the generic settings dialog where now you can set that between 1 milliseconds up to 500 milliseconds in 1 to 5 steps. So you can decide right amount your instantaneous time is for your device under test. Adjust that. All right, on a waveform display, if I wanted to adjust the y-axis range of a signal, I needed to right-click on that signal, choose trace setup. Now, if I just double-click, automatically perception is going to open up the display setup dialog, go to the traces setup page, and select the signal I clicked on active. So it's automatically ready for me to make adjustments to the signal. And you're also going to notice there's a new entry down here at the bottom of the scale list. We've always had input range fixed trace, but the new entry is automatic. Personally, I'm really excited about this one because if I'm sitting and running a test and I'm watching data and let's say my current is increasing or my power is increasing, well, I do an auto scale once perception and then that signal increases out of the range displayed, I have to keep right clicking and say auto all on page to see where the signals are. If I select automatic, then perception is going to, as that changes, automatically rescale the y-axis of that trace so that it's always, you can always see that trace in the display. And I think that's going to be very handy and people really like it. The other thing you notice is if I go and free zoom, in perception, we've always had the ability to have two zoom windows, alt zoom and zoom. And if I zoom in multiple times to see what's interesting here, in the past, if I wanted to zoom back and just step back across my steps, I always had to right click and say zoom back. But now you can see we have a new keyboard shortcut, Control K. So zoom back, but I can also just use the keyboard to step in and out of those steps that I've done. And that's pretty handy, I think. And of course, easily remove those zoom windows. All right, let me go back here for a few last items. Virtual Workbench between mainframes. This is something that standard perception has done for a long time, but it was not set up to work with an ePower. The idea is we have a user that has 4 different test cells, and so they have 4 different mainframes. Each virtual workbench, the setup file for perception, remembers the mainframe and looks for it based on mainframe name and IP address. And if it doesn't find the mainframe, what perception will do is pop up this dialog that says, hey, I didn't find the mainframe I was looking for, but I did find these other mainframes on the network. Would you like me to use one? So you can click on a mainframe, say continue, and perception is going to load those settings into that mainframe. The requirement for those settings to load is that the same type of module needs to be in the same slot. So if the original mainframe had 3 CanB power modules in slots A and B, and an 840 universal card in C, then if I want all of those settings to load in the second mainframe, I need it to have the same configuration. some usability changes in the acquisition set dialog and the acquisition control panel. The first is you're going to see we actually show the cycle-based results here in a list of storage and time-based. Previously, there was an italic line that just said cycle-based results are always stored, but that statement caused confusion with the users, and so we've just made it match exactly the way everything else is done. It's always set up for storage, so you can't turn it off, just like before, but it gives you a more clear representation of what's happening. In addition, the cycle-based results is displayed in the graphic at the top so that you can see that it's always being stored with that blue continuous line. We also added the interruption bracket here. If you have more than 2 triggered sweeps that are being allowed or possible with your acquisition settings, you're just going to see that interruption bracket to show that there's things happening here besides the 2 that you see. And finally, in the control panel, previously we did not show the checkboxes storage in the acquisition control panel, either in ePower or in the standard acquisition control panel. And that could result in someone possibly that they didn't have perception set up to store raw data or store a certain group of data. So that information is now being displayed in both locations. So in summary, Section 8.0, you need to have maintenance on your license good through August 1st, 2022 to upgrade. Be sure when you do that initial upgrade that you go through version 8.28 first and then up to 8.30. We've got a variety of new features and enhancements, and we hope you enjoy them. So download it today and start working with it. And I'm going to hand it back to Shannon for Q&A.
So, now at this time, if anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A panel. Ask Krista anything that you like. And a reminder that today's presentation will be emailed to all attendees. The webinar will also be posted on our website. Here's one. What hardware is required for CanBus control?
Just need to have that CanBus either integrated option or the peak dongle into those tethered mainframes. As soon as you've got the option in your mainframe, it supports all 3 of the CanBus capabilities: the recording, the publishing, and the control.
Cool. Just want to clarify, the new harmonics feature is strictly for 1560 HC signals.
Correct. That IEC 61000 formula is strictly for 1560 hertz signals. So if you're interested in harmonic information out for other frequencies, you would continue to use the @cycle harmonics phase or the @cycle harmonic RMS formula that have been in the real-time form database for a while.
Great. Is there any way you could step through the new spectrum analysis feature?
I do not have a 50 hertz or 60 hertz signal, but what I can do is I'll get the list of questions here and I can definitely get back to you individually and show you of how that works. I think I share the quick start guide that will probably answer your questions, but I'll send it out your way.
Cool. Will the harmonic bar graph work with the post-process formulas for harmonics?
I believe at the moment the harmonics display is strictly taking the output. What happens is that harmonics IEC function has a completely output format than a standard function from, and so it actually has all of the harmonics and all of the amplitudes and everything is all coming out of a formula, which is a whole new data type there. And I think that was expected for that display, but I will verify that and let you know.
Great. More questions. Is it possible to add EtherCAT to existing mainframe?
It is, as long as your mainframe either has a carrier card with an empty slot in it or an empty slot, because the EtherCAT option lives in what we call carrier card for the frame. So if that's something that's of interest to you, it can be definitely added in the field. You just order a carrier card with Ethernet, and we ship it to you, and you power it up in frame, slide it in, and then power it up, and you're ready to go.
Cool. Last here, how do I figure out if I can upgrade to V30?
Check that maintenance expiration date on your licenses. So in Perception, go to the Help menu and choose About Perception, and your maintenance expiration is listed in that dialog. So as long as that is August 1st, 2022 or later, you're able to upgrade and use it today.
I don't see any other questions coming through, so I think we can wrap up today's session. On behalf of Krista and myself, we thank you again for joining us. Look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.